Okay, I'm okay to record. And so we've got this logo or this line saying make a line for arts education. And we've come up with that because it's sort of, it's like in a world of change and a world of what is our bottom line? What happens if you cross a line and there's no return? It's like sort of that whole thing with climate change where it gets to a certain point where we can't turn it back. And it's like, does it get to a certain point in arts education where we have to really, really think, can we keep going or what? So we've used this as a metaphor, but it's also can be seen as a positive metaphor as, you know, what kind of connections can we make across the arts and across the world to support arts education? What lines can we draw to support each other? So that's the thinking behind this make a line. And it's also, it's a doing thing. Make a picture, make a shape, make a chorus line, make a stand for arts education. So there's all sorts of different ways of reading it, but that's the whole point of this making a line. So we in WA have got 2 sessions, tonight and tomorrow night, and some people in the world will be able to make it to both the events and others not, according to the different time frames, etc. And so as you can see on the screen right now, we have the 2 sessions tonight and tomorrow night. So thank you, Teresa. Our conversation is really aiming to just foster the dialogue about the new UNESCO framework for culture and arts education that was proclaimed in Abu Dhabi a few months ago. And several of us tonight or today in our meeting were at Abu Dhabi, and Sarah Knox from the World Dance Alliance will speak especially to what happened, and others can join in as well. Teresa's just put up a link to the framework that UNESCO has currently developed. So tonight we're going to give a bit of a context for the WAAE, that framework, and then we're going to open up the floor basically to talk about it and to just start thinking about ideas and issues and questions and directions that we can start picking up on and actioning when we meet in Athens at the next WAAE conference in October this year. So you'll see there's the conversation agenda, and now we're moving on to who the WAAA is. We always introduce the World Alliance for Arts Education because for many people it is an ongoing surprise that it exists, and for others who know it very, very well. But there are 4 founding organizations in the World Alliance for Arts Education: International Drum Education Association, IDEA, International Society for Education throughout INSEA, International Music Education Society, ISME, and the World Dance Alliance. And we have, I'm not sure if we have Patricia Gonzalez or anyone from music from ISME on the session. Patricia, are you here? No. Is there, just going through, not sure. So ISME is one of our main organizations, but we might come back to ISME. Would you like to talk about INSEA, Teresa?
Just to say that INSEA is the World Organization for Visual Arts, and we are now celebrating our 70 years of being alive.
70 years, that's impressive. Thank you very much. And you can see some of the details there. INSEA and ISME have a strong connection and an individual connection to UNESCO and to also their own professional associations. But they also get quite a lot of traction through the collection of the World Alliance for Arts Education. The World Dance Alliance. Sarah Knox, do you want to speak ever so briefly to the World Dance Alliance? You're on
Still
mute.
got the hang of the mute, but there I am. Thanks, Ralph. I'm Sarah Knox. I'm the co-chair of the World Dance Alliance Asia Pacific Education and Training Network. And my co-chair is the wonderful Anna Chan, who's based in Hong Kong. The World Dance Alliance was founded in Hong Kong in 1988. There are various networks around the world. So there's the Asia Pacific, Europe and the Americas, and there are networks, so the Education and Training Network, the Creation and Performance Network, the Documentation and Research Network, so each of those areas of the World Dance Alliance work on specific kinds of activities, and we are strongest in the Asia Pacific region.
Thank you very, very much. Sonia, would you like to talk about the idea?
Yes, well, as we can say that maybe we are strongest in the European region because we have many members from Europe. And IDEA was founded, it is the International Drama Theatre and Education Association. We are not 70 years old, we are a little younger, 32 years now, because we were founded in 1992 in Porto, Portugal. And we are an association of individuals and professional associations supporting and promoting drama, theatre, and education. We also organize regional and international congresses for drama, theatre, education. Like this July, we are happy to host the congress in Beijing in China. We also initiate different research programs, produce international publications, encourage the exchange of drama theatre practitioners between our members. What I can also say is that we are very happy and proud to be part of the World Alliance for Arts Education, because we also believe that together we can do more for arts education in the world, together with our sister organizations that are present here. So this is it.
Thank you very much, Sonia. Teresa, do you want to go to the ISME slide? And I'll just very quickly talk to ISME on behalf of ISME. So International Society, thank you. International Society for Music Education, 1953 is when I was founded. I suspect that ISME is probably the largest of our organizations. It has a huge membership, and it has very, very strong connections to the music industry in both the education sphere and also in the professional artist sphere, as we all do. But music, being music, has a very strong and very popular reach across the breadth of society. So it has been around for a very long time and has obviously a very strong connection with UNESCO. The current chair is WAAE, and he is in Hong Kong, and I know that he is coming late to this meeting, but the incumbent president is Patricia Gonzalez, and she's in Mexico, and it's probably a horrible time in the morning, so she probably is sound asleep very sensibly and will probably join the meeting tomorrow. Thank you very much, Teresa. So that's the World Alliance for Arts Education. We were, no, I suppose, Dan, well, actually, Dan, you might want to speak to the very beginnings of the WAAE in Portugal, if you want to briefly speak to a quick history.
Well, I think, first of all, recognizing Teresa as one of the key influences in bringing us together just before the first World Conference on Arts Education, UNESCO World Conference. I think the best way of describing this, the World Alliance was formed as a kind of protest against the expectation that UNESCO held at that time that we would legitimize, we would affirm the outcomes of the World Conference before it began. And there was a feeling that there was a need in 2006 to talk about a paradigm crisis and the need for reimagining education. I think that's become more focused over the last 20 years. But that was a very, very dynamic moment. We sat together to what became, to create the, not the manifesto, but the declaration of an intention to work together, because we felt that education without the arts permeating the entire curriculum didn't have the capacity to answer the needs of young people and the needs to reimagine the future. And I don't think we anticipated that at that time the climate collapse that we're living through today, but we certainly felt that there was a kind of civilization crisis, and there was a need to engage the arts in creating policy. I think that was the key point, that we were not talking about an academic or a practice-based alliance only. We were also talking, or research-based alliance, but we were talking about the need to create policy together. So in 2006, the vision that emerged was, and this really was a powerful spark to begin the World Conference, the UNESCO World Conference. The vision that emerged was a vision of meeting together to build policy. And I think the only other detail that I would add at this point is to say that it took us a few years to learn to listen to one another's experience and diversity and the differences between the artistic languages, but at the same time, there was a great sense of purpose. I think that's where I'd leave it for now, Ralph.
Thank you very much, Dan. That's great. Obrigado. So there are some keywords in what Dan said, which are going to resonate in the next section when we talk about WAAE advocacy, which is on your screens. So that notion of protest, that need to engage, that need to develop policy has stayed genuinely at the core of a lot of our action. And one of the key actions that happened in 2019 was the Frankfurt Declaration that came out of the Frankfurt Conference that Joachim Reis in Frankfurt hosted. And I'd like to invite Joachim just to speak briefly about the Frankfurt Declaration, as it was also, oh no, I'll just leave that for you, Joachim. If you'd like to speak, Joachim.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. And I can be short because it is just the main point that we had another, like many other summits of the WAAE, yeah, in all these years. We had another summit in Frankfurt in 2019, and it was quite a big one. And so we really, after a decade after the Seoul Agenda, yeah, from 2010, we tried to push UNESCO and to ask UNESCO, and UNESCO was present in this conference. Yeah, what did happen? Yeah, is the Seoul Agenda happening in all countries of the world and the education systems and so on? And of course, we know and we knew that is not the fact, that it was not, has not become into real policy what the Seoul Agenda said at that time, at 2010. So I think we have learned, yeah, that international papers, international decisions from UNESCO and so on do not change necessarily national policies without needs or pressure in all the countries. And that was the main thing of the Frankfurt Declaration, to give another push to UNESCO. And we were lucky that UNESCO answered in that way, that they tried to go into a new process, which ended in this framework paper from Abu Dhabi this year. And what we should have learned, and that's the message from the Frankfurt Declaration and Frankfurt meeting, is it's not enough to have wonderful papers. We need to push from civil society to the policy, yeah, and try to influence and remind and again and again and again, build networks and try to find somehow a way to the decision makers and drive them and push them to make good decisions in terms of their papers. We already have a lot and wonderful, and that's not the problem. We do have wonderful words, but not wonderful actions in most of the countries. And in Germany, it's all the same. And we started with the framework now with some small activities in our region. I only say this as an example, and I can perhaps give more examples afterwards when we are in the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Joachim. Again, there are some very, very good points that Joachim makes in regard to the need to keep pushing, the need to turn words into action, and also reaching and working across borders and departments within governments and within barriers within countries. It's an ongoing mission. And it's also important to note that these issues are not specific to arts education. And speaking to other educators, it's very much a part of a certain emerging educational world. But I'm very excited and proud of some of the things that are happening in arts education, and that the WAAE is making some small wins and small gains. And part of that is that the WAAE has been listened to by UNESCO and has been purposefully involved or connected to and invited to participate in particular forums and in particular events. And I suppose the first one that we want to speak to is our WA response to the International Commission on the Futures of Education in 2020. And we made a strong and very blunt request to make sure that arts education was included in that. And I mean, it's a huge and powerful document, and there are some quotes in there from the WAAE in that document. And just the fact that arts education was included and that, WAAE was quoted is at least, something. But then the key thing was that the next point on that list is that we had a conference, a summit in Madeira, in Funchal, and it was a great conference, and the focus was many things. But in Madeira, the organizing committee really worked hard on connecting with teachers and with the local community and reaching into the wider Portuguese community. And we had invited several speakers from UNESCO there, and they listened very, very hard to what we were talking about. And we had lots of sessions, lots of planning sessions on arts education. And it was great. We had extremely good feedback, and that went back to Paris. And then following from that meeting, we were invited to lead the survey or the development of what does the arts education community actually want. So we were informative in developing a survey, and then we implemented that survey across our networks, and then we gathered the data from that survey, and then we did an analysis of that survey, and we presented that at the multi-stakeholder dialogue in UNESCO Paris on the 25th and 26th of May. All of that is just to say that we did all of that in partnership with UNESCO. But as Dan said, we are not bedfellows with UNESCO. We are there to keep UNESCO honest and to try and to represent what we want, not what UNESCO wants us to want. But we have to have partnerships. And as Joachim said, if we're not going to have these important networks so as we can turn policy into action, then we're just sort of speaking to ourselves. So we do have to hold hands, and we have been extremely effective over the last few years of holding hands with some key players in UNESCO. And I think for me, one of the key outcomes of the Frankfurt meeting was that Ke Leng, the current key person in regard to arts education within UNESCO in Paris, was there, and he has taken a strong commitment to supporting arts education and to help the arts section of UNESCO and the education section of UNESCO, two separate wings of the building, to actually talk to each other. And we all know how difficult that is in our arts education roles, to have educators and artists continuously talking. But we've had great fortune in having a great relationship with Ke Leng. And when we have our next WAAE meeting in Athens in October, Ke Leng will also be there to present the UNESCO perspective and to keep fostering that connection. So that's great. So anyway, at Paris, we presented the findings of our survey, and Teresa did a presentation. And Teresa, do you want to very, very briefly just want to talk to what we did in Paris?
So in Paris, what we presented was the results of the survey that we have conducted during the previous month. And I think it was important for us to be in this roundtable with all the ministries and the secretaries of state on education and on culture, and bring the voice of all art educators of our network. So it was really a strategic plan to be there and to have our voice listened by these key holders, currently key holders in matters of politics, in culture and in education. So you can access our recommendations in the webpage, and I will put it on chat also, so you can read the recommendations that we provide in Paris.
Thank you very much. That's great. I mean, I suppose the thing in all of these meetings is we don't have to be there, and we're not necessarily always invited, or, you know, there's a lot of invitations and a lot of people aren't allowed to speak or not invited to speak. But we've enjoyed quite a great success in being invited consistently to present at these international forums, which has been quite great. So after the multi-stakeholder dialogue, the UNESCO then carried on to develop the framework for arts education. The WAAE report that we sent to UNESCO shaped, I mean, how much we can never say, but enough to represent what we want to get out of this new policy. And then it was launched in Abu Dhabi on the 14th of February this year. And several of us were at that meeting, but Sarah Knox was representing the World Dance Alliance at that meeting. And Sarah, would you like to speak to that meeting in Abu Dhabi in February?
Sure, I can do. Thanks, Ralph. So it was a real privilege to be at the conference in Abu Dhabi and to meet some of you all in person for the first time. So that was really wonderful. And there are about almost 1,000 people there, I think. So it was quite a big conference and kind of overwhelming at certain points. But I will speak just briefly about our side event. And I'm just going to share my screen with you all. I can just slideshow. There we go. Hopefully you can all see that. So we were really lucky to be able to hold a side event, which was a 1 hour forum. We were working in collaboration with Daisy, and Jeff Miners, who many of you will know from Australia, was there as well. Oh, now how do I do that? Our side event was actually quite different to a number of the other side events that were on at the conference, and that most of the side events that we went to were really more like a panel of people who were speaking about arts organisations and projects and that sort of thing in their local contexts. What was different about our side event was that we were responding directly to the framework and working to kind of interrogate what it actually is and what it means for us and what we can do next as arts educators. And we had a workshop format, so we really wanted to put all of our attendees in dialogue with each other. So as Ralph said, not everybody always gets the opportunity to speak at these sorts of events. So it was really wonderful that all of our attendees had the opportunity to respond to the framework, and our discussions were notated, and then those formed the basis of the reports that we sent back to UNESCO. So we gave our attendees 2 prompts to discuss. The first prompt was the implementation recommendations for professional arts organisations, and the second prompt was to discuss implementation challenges for arts organisations. We divided everybody into 4 groups, so about 30 attendees, I think. And we matched up you'll see in the framework there are 8 implementation modalities, and we paired those up into kind of logical pairings. So we had governance, legislation and policies and financing as one group discussion, research, data, assessment and partnerships and interinstitutional coordination as a second. Digital technologies and AI and learning environments was the third group, and then teachers, educators and learning experiences was the final group. So due to it being only 1 hour, we had to talk quite fast. And so that was a really good way for us to attend to each of the implementation modalities and get that feedback gathered from everybody. The morning after our side event, we had the quite difficult task of having to distill all of our notes down into 80 words to send back to UNESCO. So that was quite a challenge. Jeff and I sat at breakfast and crafted, this is our short report that was sent back. And we really tried to just encapsulate what we thought were the very most important parts of all of those discussions. So that was the first report that was sent back. And then about a month later, we worked on a slightly more detailed report. And you'll see here some of the key recommendations. There were a number of discussions in all of the groups around not only identifying the current gaps in our landscape of arts education, but also identifying what actually really works, because we know that there are organisations doing wonderful work. We know that there's wonderful partnerships and collaborations that already exist. We know that there's wonderful practices and pedagogies that are already there. So what are they, and how do we actually know what's going on, so that future partnerships might be set up, so that we can better access information and advocate for the work that we do. There was a call for a global database to be created in some shape or form that might help us to actually ascertain what these successful practices and organisations might be, what do they do really well, how do they do it, so that might serve as a resource for other arts organisations to move into the future. Arts-based pedagogies, policy, creation of policy, and teacher education also came up as themes throughout the discussion groups. And then another key theme that came through was to not lose or not dilute the things that we do really well, and to not dilute specificity in our arts practices, and to really maintain and foster our Indigenous knowledges and sharing of practices as well. I'm just dodging things around my screen. There we go. So challenges that were raised. We called upon UNESCO to support the creation of this database and to provide guidance. As we move forward, there were several questions that emerged. How are partnerships ascertained as innovative and fit for purpose? How do we address the gaps in arts education regarding the new framework? How might some of the smaller projects that we know exist be scaled up and be made more accessible to more diverse communities or broader communities? There was a focus on formal, informal, non-formal learning contexts and sustainable lifelong and life-wide learning. Funding and resourcing, as always, are a challenge for us, and it was great to see UNESCO responded to that at the end of the conference by saying that there would be some sort of funding available to support the enaction of the framework, and pointing out that, as always, advocacy and strategic action is required for funders and to government levels. So that's kind of a quick summary. We are looking at generating a slightly longer report that we will hopefully be able to share at the DAISY conference this year and then in Athens as well in October. So we look forward to sharing more. And I'll just point out this web link for you, which is on the WAAE website, which has got, I think, a video recording and some more information about our side event in the report as well. So that's me. 1 hour of fast talking distilled down into 80 words. Thanks, Ralph.
You're getting more and more skilled at this sort of brevity. Thank you very much, Sarah, and thank you, everyone, for your patience. I mean, the key thing for me in all of this is that the WAAE has been at these forums, has been presenting, has been representing the arts education networks and the field, and collecting voices and ideas, and also going forward with ideas back to UNESCO, but also back to our own disciplines and our own networks. So it's really good. Before we do enter into our first question about where we all get opportunity to talk about challenges and opportunities in our local community, I think it's important if I can just go to the actual framework that you all have, or you may have seen, or you've connected to, or may not have. But there are some key points, and on page 4 of the current framework, there are the objectives, and it's just worth pointing out the 4 main objectives of this new framework. And the first objective is basically making sure that culture and arts education contribute directly to sustainable development and peace. So UNESCO is really, really keen to make this connection between culture, arts education, sustainable development goals, and peace. And, you know, as we all know, we need that as much as possible. The second key objective was to basically acknowledge contemporary advances in our art forms, but in technology. And post-COVID and now our hybrid learnings and this very meeting with Zoom, there's a whole new way of connecting and building relationships and using that within our education forums and in our art making. So that was a key objective. The third objective was to not hold culture and arts education separately, but to see them working together. And from a policy and ministry point of view, both within educations, within UNESCO, etc. Thank you, Teresa. The whole thing of culture and arts education working together is super important. So I think it's worthwhile remembering those things. So those 3 big objectives, I think, that's what's driving this whole thing. Peace, sustainable development, technology, and the importance of culture and arts education in our world, in fostering creativity, in fostering collaboration, fostering a better education. So the framework goes on to talk about strategic goals, you know, and one of, you know, as you go through just quickly, there's a strategic goal of inclusion, access, equity. I mean, really, really important. And the next big one is quality lifelong and life-wide learning. That it's, you know, education happens across different parts of one's life and throughout one's life. The third one is the appreciation of cultural diversity and capacity for critical engagement, and using what we do to be critical of the world. The fourth one, skills to shape resilient, just, and sustainable futures. So that sense of resilience. 5, formalization and valorization of the culture and arts education ecosystems. I mean, as Joachim said, these are all words, they are all policies, and they're pretty fancy words. You know, they're very aspirational, but it is great to have them on the paper, and it is great to have them signed off by, you know, UNESCO, which basically means 197 countries have agreed to advance this kind of thing. A lot of those countries don't know it exists, but they actually have endorsed it. And I won't go on, but there's quite a few goals in the document that really do present lots of opportunities for us as arts educators. So it's 8:38, or I'm not quite sure what time it is in your book, but we've basically got 20 minutes to talk about some of our questions. So I sort of want to open up to everyone to follow up with what Sarah said, with 2 lists, challenges and opportunities. What are some of the challenges and what are some of the opportunities in your community? And I think that's the key thing. We want to know what's going to happen in your neck of the woods. Sanya, your hand is up, and Dan, your hand is up. So Sanya, what can you like to add?
First of all, I would like to welcome WAAE, our colleague from the Presidential Forum of WAAE.
Hi, WAAE.
Hello, WAAE.
Thank you.
From
Hi, thank you. Sorry for being late.
No, it's okay. Welcome. And the second, I would just like to make a few points. And I must say, I'm very excited that we are all have gathered together as we did last year in Paris at the UNESCO headquarters. That was also a significant event with the multi-stakeholders dialogue. But what I want to point out is that there was this very good remark of the Minister of Education from Portugal, who said that it is the importance of art education is huge, and it is really strange that we have to have policies and frameworks and the Seoul Agenda and all these documents to justify all the time and remind about the importance of arts education. And we never have to do it for mathematics or physics or chemistry or some other fields, you know, that exist in the STEM. As we all know, we are fighting for the STEAM agenda. This is one thing. The second thing I want to say is that we all know that it is the UNESCO International Week for Arts Education, a really important event for all of us here gathered. And advocacy doesn't have to be on high level. We don't have to imagine that advocacy is something that it has to go with presenting the framework to our Minister of Culture or Education, or go, you know, knocking on doors. But it can be very small actions, like the actions we had yesterday that was connected to the beginning of our International Week of Arts Education. That is the ringing the bells action. Ring the bells, make a noise, play the drum for arts education. We realized actually that the members of our 4 associations, we can count millions of members, and our members have their pupils, they have their children, have the students, have the elderly, the seniors that they are working with. And if everybody just rings the bells in one moment and just makes some noise and makes us visible, so that people can see how many of us are really invested in arts education and believe that this is something important. So I just wanted to point out these few things, just to remind ourselves that we should, or what is our mission is to also remind everybody that there is such a document. Because I have just given a speech in Chengdu a few days ago in China, And they really did not hear about the framework, even though there was a huge delegation from China. It was the Chengdu University. So, you know, to point out, okay, now you have the document, because they were kept asking how to have more arts education, how to have more drama education. And okay, we have a brand new document. It's a good one. It's very hard to reconcile all the opinions and the whole worldwide arts education field and culture field, but we are trying our best. So I just wanted to point out these few things. Thank you, Rob.
Thank you, Sonia. And yes, it's very, very important. And it's really important to remember that this week is International Arts Education Week. And again, I can remember speaking to this very, very thing in Paris with Dan and with Rita, and I'm trying to remember, what was the ISME representative at the time? Was it the guy from Sweden? I think anyway, that's a new story. Moving on, let's talk about the challenges and opportunities. So would anyone like to just talk about what the framework might mean for you in your local community? Some challenges or opportunities that you can see in Brazil or in Hong Kong or in Perth or wherever you may be sitting. Anyone?
Maybe I can say something.
Yes.
Actually, I can feel a really strong challenge is a kind of difficulty is that, you know, I try to communicate with the Education Bureau of Hong Kong government, inform them that we have that webinar today, and one of the chief curriculum officer in arts education, he promised to come, but he has not come as far as I know. So I would like to say that it's very hard to make the government to listen to us. This is the biggest challenge, I think, because it seems that in Hong Kong we have a very strong trend in education is to promote STEM education, you know, technology, AI, or all these things. But arts education is now even further marginalized. I just say I try to promote arts education to the Education Bureau, but they still focus on technology, science rather than arts. This is the problem.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much, Boa. And I think we all feel that. Just ever so briefly, something that we are doing here in the University of Auckland in New Zealand in regard to the ever-presence of STEM, etc., is the word of transdisciplinarity or interdisciplinarity, and how we're trying to draw disciplinary networks across the university faculties, and developing basically research teams where you have to have people from at least 3 different faculties. So a thing that our university is doing is developing a whole new transdisciplinary curriculum where you have the faculty of law, engineering, and the arts or creative arts, or whatever those different combinations are, but you can't just do it in your own discipline area. You have to purposefully and meaningfully stretch across the different disciplines. And I think that's a strategy that the university here in New Zealand is looking to recognize, that, you know, science isn't finding the answers to everything. And the arts are not the only way to be creative. And there's lots of different ways of, you know, skinning the cat. So, but if we, as we said right at the beginning, you know, some of the things that Dan said in regard to holding hands and working together and developing skills of engaging and listening to each other, then we might be able to utilize STEM, or get STEM to utilize arts education, or etc., to make that work. But Boa, I hear you loud and clear. You know, they're not turning up, but we've got to drag people up. So this whole STEAM thing is a real thing. But yes, Dan.
Yeah, I wanted to in a way, connect with a few different points that have been made. I think the first insight I got from the World Alliance was the importance of advocacy through the arts and as a language or a series of languages, and particularly by young people. So the people we brought to Frankfurt, to the summit there, today are advocating directly to government. And I think that has had the greatest impact. It's not just a question of being able to support their advocacy through research, but also through demonstrating their leadership, their governance, their capacity to become eco-pedagogues through the arts. And that has been very powerful. I mean, we're now talking to 6, 8 ministries at the same time around the same table and looking at arts education in pedagogical terms, permeating all different areas of civil society. So that's one important insight that I got from the World Alliance. But it wasn't just an insight, it was actually making the commitment to a community education, or what we call a popular education process outside formal education, and formal education being shaped by traditional cultures, by, in our case, riverside or maritime cultures. That was very, very important. But the other, I think, important detail in terms of a challenge is that now the mining companies and not just the mining companies, but other large petroleum companies, they are absorbing all of the key insights, the importance of sustainability, of diversity, of the key questions and key themes that have perhaps been a feature of the World Alliance right from the outset. And we have had to take very symbolic, but also very practical steps in not accepting any funding from the mining companies. I mean, in terms of being able to talk about, in our case, a sustainable Amazon and the impact of the Amazon on all the oceans and rivers in the world, that stance has also generated hope. And that's the point I really want to make, that it's, on one level, you can take the kind of Brechtian position, which is that if you're going to sell yourself for the highest price and recognize the contradictions involved in funding. But on another level, and this is particularly coming from young people, there is a need for hope and for ethics, and not just for pragmatism, but to think very seriously of offering an ecological or a more ecocentric perspective on the world. So this raises key challenges in questions of alliances which will offer motivation and offer the belief that schools and universities can be changed into the ecosystems that we want. They can be changed into the biomes that we want. And I would finish just by saying that I remember clearly, I didn't remember this verb when I first spoke, but I think we were challenging UNESCO to reimagine its relationship with practitioners, and also to think about popular education and community education as sources of formal education's development. And I think today that challenge is more urgent given the kind of climate collapse that we're talking about. Thanks.
Thank you, Dan. I'm reading people's comments and I can see the posts, and thank you, Robin, for your most recent one. But Penny, you've had your hand up, and thank you for waiting.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I mean, everything that Dan said as well, I think everybody's made very good points. I think I don't know everybody, so apologies. And Teresa, thank you for inviting me.
Penny, do you just want to introduce yourself very quickly?
Yes, sure. Sorry, I was just going to do that. So I'm Penny Hay. I'm newly appointed last year as professor at Basbar University. I'm actually Professor of Imagination, which is very Harry Potter, but it kind of melts the room when you give a talk, which is good to get people involved in how everybody's imaginative and creative. But yes, so I teach at Basbar University, and I've been very involved down in what we call kind of gentle climate activism around ecological and creative approaches to pedagogy. And I think what you said is absolutely vital. I've just written a chapter actually for Goldsmiths University on exactly that. It'll be out soon and I can share that with you. But I suppose my concern and challenge or question for the team, and I'm a big fan of WAAE and spoke at the Peace Conference thanks to Teresa, and obviously peace and ecological pacifist and ecological approaches, I think, to education are really important. I personally don't like the STEAM acronym because I think it excludes a lot of other disciplines, but that's just one of my things that I can talk about another time. I think it's about the transcontextual, transdisciplinary space where we need to fight for the arts and we need to fight for the integrity of each art form and across the arts. So it's learning in and about and through the arts. But I think especially your points in the chat about, young people leading, we're working in the UK context, but also in the Global South with our partnership projects and in Europe, even though we're not in Europe anymore, the irony. I think that, it is really important that we're joined up together. And so I come to these meetings, I go to the INSEA meetings, I go to the National Society for Education, Art and Design meetings when I can. And I think that the links more recently with people like Dominic Register for the Salzburg Global Group, he's working with UNESCO, working with Francois Tade, who you may know for the Learning Planet Alliance in France, in Paris. He's working on the notion of an ecological citizen, planetizen, but the idea of, young people championing the importance of the arts and ecological education in the current kind of existential crisis. And I think it's probably never been more important. And the last thing just to say is, I'll just pop it in the chat, found the link for you. I'm part of the advisory group for the Cultural Learning Alliance in the UK, which is a really, really strong group of people across the arts. Jackie O'Hanlon from the Royal Shakespeare Company, Sally Bacon, who's recently co-authored the new version of Sir Ken Robinson's Arts in Schools. So I really recommend that we link up with them as well, because I suppose one of my concerns is that it's too disparate. Why are there only 16 of us on this call, for instance? I think I think we need to set up something that draws all of these strands together so we can support each other in our own work, thinking about, what you said this morning, but also or this evening, sorry, for those of you in different time frames, but also what we can do to make a difference. I mean, I've been immersed in this work for, goodness knows, many, many years, and it's never been more urgent.
Thank you very much, Penny. Yes, I mean, I agree. Many things to comment on, but I'm going to ask Robin in Perth if you want to speak anything in particular to your point about teachers and classrooms, grassroots.
Thank you, Ralph, and everyone. Greetings from Perth, where we are slowly, but not yet, leaving autumn. Okay, so maybe winter will happen sometime soon. But the point that I think that I wanted to make, and I agree with all of the conversation that we've been having, and I'm thinking about all of the points that we've made, but I think that also, while we do need to be operating at the level of government, at the level of influencing politicians and all of those ideas, I think we need to remember that one of our greatest strengths are the people who teach and work on the ground, and that we need to think about a groundswell movement amongst those, because I think that again goes back to the points that Dan was making at the beginning about the beginnings of the WAAE. It's also about the importance of recognizing that we need to amplify the voices of ourselves. And the way that we do that is through recognizing the importance of the teacher, the arts worker, the community leader in their environment and working through that. So that was the point that I wanted to make and share today. Thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you, Robin. It's always great to hear from you. And I think it's really important to remember that we do have vast numbers of connections in our classrooms and opportunities there. But it's also a key point that Dan mentioned that, you know, arts education happens in informal, non-formal and informal spaces. And we have to remember those diverse places for where education happens, in particular arts education. I know that Thanatachon Porn Kitakong has kept on mute the whole time, but I presume that you're in Thailand, Thanatachon, and would you like to say anything?
Hi there. I've been listening. I'm pretty new here, but yesterday I just see this webinar, announcement of this webinar, so I signed up, and it's really interesting. Yeah, I think we are facing the same problems in art education, and I'm actually in the middle and struggle with, you know, doing some developmental programs in the university, and they've started to talk about shutting down or some of the curriculum that are not making money or didn't have, you know, the valid or reliable outcome. So I am kind of like trying to see if there is any opportunities, and I'm really interested on how we get together and learn more about this.
Yeah. Thanatachon, where are you speaking from?
Thailand. Yes, Thailand. You're right.
Your name gives it away, but
Oh.
you could have been in some other place. That's great. Thank you very much. And similarly, Sinem Aceh Sosbir, would you like to say anything?
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. I'm very glad to join to your webinar. This is my first time. Can you hear me?
Yes, loud and
clear. Okay. I'm now in Australia, in Melbourne, actually. I'm trying to do my postdoctoral research here with Professor Gary McPherson. But I'm actually from Turkey. And I will go back to Turkey in September. So this is very important and interesting for me to hear from you, because it's everything actually in music education. It's terrible in Turkey. I don't know how to develop our educational system. What can we do, because our government, the music education and the art education is not as important as mathematics or the other science subjects. And actually, I'm working in university as an assistant professor in Turkey, and unfortunately, it's not possible to do things with the schools hand in hand. It's so difficult in Turkey. So yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
I mean, it's really important to remember that, you know, these global policies developed, you know, in fancy places are only as powerful as their meaning and their use in your local school, in your local community, in your home. It's really important to keep things coming back to what is relevant and what it means in your local communities. So Adriana Nichting, and I'm going to presume you're in Germany or Austria, or do you have anything that's specific about, or wherever, about what the policy, what the framework might mean for you in your community?
I'm from the Netherlands. So, but
Thank you.
my ancestors from my father's side were from Germany. That's why my name is Nichting. Yeah. Yeah, it's very recognizable, and I'm somewhat older, so I recognize very many things, and yeah, and we have to go on and on and on, and sometimes you gain something, and it's like an Eastern parade, 2 steps ahead and 1 step back, and sometimes 2 steps and 3 steps back. And now in the Netherlands, we have the problem, we have no government, we have an interim government, and there is a movement to the right, and they don't bother about culture, most of them, but we have many parties, so we hope that it will be all right. But it's a struggle, and we have also problems in the education. So the main point is now again reading and mathematics, because the results are not very good, and that's also because we have a great population. We have a baby boom after World War II, a population that is now in the 70s, me too. And there are less younger people, so we have a shortage of teachers on all kinds of education, and a shortage of doctors and dentists, and all so on. It's really a problem. And then you see that culture is a secondary. It's not important enough, but we go on. I hope.
Yes, we do go on. It's very interesting you raised that point, Adriana. I was listening to the radio here in Auckland in New Zealand this morning, talking about a global phenomenon of children not turning up to school, of absenteeism. You know, it's sweeping the whole world.
Yeah.
And interestingly enough, as so much of education across the whole world is, I hate this, but I'll say it, going back to basics, more of the children are not going to school. And I just kind of think, isn't it ironic? You know, if we looked forward with arts education, maybe we wouldn't be having absenteeism problems in many of our schools right now. So yeah, so I think arts education does present opportunities to move against this return.
It's another way of manner of learning, and
yes,
sometimes
indeed.
they forget that they only look at the cijfers.
Yes, the economic
and not what you gain by learning through your eyes, through your hands, through we had an old saying, head, hands and heart, that you need in education, and it's still, for me, it's still that. Wonderful. Not only the head, but also the heart and the hands.
Yes, yes, indeed. Thank you. Sanya, you have raised your hand.
Yes, I want to say a special greeting to Adriana, who is a member of IDEA, but also a wonderful documentarist of all our webinars and meetings. And I don't know if she's drawing something, because she makes a drawing of what is happening, and we have a visual documentation.
Come on, Adriana, whip up a drawing quickly. You've got 30 seconds, go.
No, it's wonderful, really, what she does. But what I want to say, I just want to add about the challenges. And I have really been, in a way, reminded by Adriana about this situation that is happening massively in Europe, all around, that right-wing governments are being elected more, conservative governments are being elected all over. And we are really worried in my country. So maybe I didn't introduce myself. My name is Sanja Krsmanović-Tasić. I'm the president of IDEA. I live in Belgrade, Serbia, but right now I'm in Colorado. and the US. And I just want to say that what is really troubling me in Serbia is that somehow the government has their own feeling that they have the right and they have all the power to decide our small destinies, you know, and it's really, really hard to acknowledge this, that we are influenced so much by the governments and by the funding that the governments provides. For example, the Ministry of Culture that gives out a call, because a lot of arts education, we have music and visual arts in schools, but drama and dance are more a part of non-formal education or projects in schools. It is not part of the curriculum. What is happening now is that the Ministry of Culture gave out a call December, January for projects, for all these kinds of projects, for educational projects. And we have all applied. My association called Center for Drama in Education and Art from Serbia, CEDEUM, has applied for projects for our Children and Youth Festival and so on. And still, now we are on the brink of June. We still do not have the results. Perhaps there will be no results. Perhaps they completely cut the funding. It's really so troublesome, you know, but because non-government associations, civil society associations that are dealing with art made a huge action last year and a few years before, really talking about how much always these results are late, and how many problems we have, you know, with the funding, and how many people get funding that are connected to the government and not people who really deserve it. And because we were doing all these actions, I have a feeling that maybe we are in a way pushed aside and punished, you know. And it's really hard. For the City Council of Belgrade decided not to give out a call for projects this year. Not to give, it just disappeared. The Department of Culture, nothing. You know, so we are so much how to empower ourselves not to be so dependent on the political situation. This is my biggest question and challenge that we all have to face. And I think, and to persevere, to really continue and to go on. So these are challenges for us, for example.
Thank you very much. And I think there are communities, particularly in our Indigenous communities, where the use of community networks and informal and non-formal civil societies or communities are working outside of the realm of government funding and those kind of parameters. So I think there are some models we can share. Teresa.
Thank you. Just in line with what you have been said, I think that everything now is collapsing, as in other periods of the history of humanity. And we see maybe there is another future for education, another kind of schools, or formal, informal education, maybe more community-based. And I see also you have said about being aware of not only the lack of funding from the government, but also be careful with the funding from companies that might be controversial for our aims in our, as Dan Barron said. So maybe I think a way forward, a challenge for us, this in what I see in Europe, challenge for us is to build other structures for arts education, not depending on governments, not depending on companies or on foundations, but depending on community and community projects, like bring art education to the communities. That's, I think it's a big challenge in my point of view.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much. Thank you, Teresa. I'm mindful of that it's 10 past the hour and we've gone over, but I just want to quickly see if Aldona wants to say anything. I know you've been sitting there quietly, Aldona. If you don't want to say anything, that's perfectly fine. But do you want to say anything, Aldona? Not to worry. Great. Thank you very much. Okay, everyone. Well, I think, as Teresa said, we have some challenges, and we do need to use our creative and our thinking, put our thinking hats on and imaginative hats. Our next forum tomorrow is going to basically be a repeat of today and carry on with the conversation. But the key thing is when we are meeting in Athens in October, the 17th to 19th of October, we will be picking up a lot of these ideas, and as we do in many of our sessions, we start to formulate some strategic action and to get some kind of plan together for how we in our different parts of the world can work, make a difference, see what we can do. There is definitely opportunities, as some of us have talked about, young people, our value of our own artists, our disciplines, our classrooms, our networks that are existing. There is opportunity, and we just have to hold on, believe in what we do, and keep holding hands to a very large extent, and keep the conversation alive. And everyone you talk to, we need to give out a badge to everyone, and keep ringing those bells, as Sonia sort of said, is to proactively reach out and ring the bells and do our thing. So as I bring this session to a close, I really do want to thank all of you for coming and for throwing your ideas onto the screen. And that's it, really. So tomorrow the session will be chaired by Teresa, and it'll be at a totally different time slot to make it much more appetizing for different people in different parts of the world. Thank you for those of you who've got up at 5 a.m., 2 a.m., 4 a.m. I think that's ridiculous. You need some work-life balance or something. But I really do applaud your support. So thank you very, very much. And the recording of this session will be on our website, and so will the notes and all of that stuff. And thank you very much, Teresa, for keeping all of that working and together. Sarah, thank you for your presentation. Joachim, thank you for your presentation. Dan, thank you for your presentation. And that's it. So with that, I'd like to say kia ora and good night or good morning. And I hope you have a really, really great day, and keep celebrating International Arts Education Week all week, loud and proud. And good night. Goodbye. Robin. Okay.
Bye.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Bye, everyone. Bye.